There's been a lot of controversy around Intel's recent use of E-cores when it comes to their 12th and 13th generation of processors. Many believe that adding these weaker cores is a burden on the CPU and even just a straight up scam by Intel trying to make their processors more appealing than AMD's. So today I want to answer the question, are E-cores even worth considering when buying a processor? Now before we can answer the question, let's do some testing. The processor we'll be taking a look at today is the i5-13600K. This CPU comes with 6 P-cores and 8 E-cores. I'll be testing 3 different configurations, one with only E-cores enabled, one with only P-cores enabled, and the final one with both enabled, which will act as our control test. Throughout this video, I overclocked my P-cores to 5.3 GHz and E-cores to 4.1 GHz, running on a Z690 motherboard from Asus with 32 GB of DDR4 3600 MHz RAM. First, let's take a look at some CPU-oriented tasks, the first being Cinebench R23. Now obviously in this test, the control configuration had the best score, but breaking down how much each core affects our overall performance is really interesting. The core only test shows us that these 8 cores are not as weak as many people expect. They scored an overall multi-core score of 8,934, which according to Cinebench is equivalent to an R7 1700X, which is a 16-threaded processor. As for our P-core only configuration, we see that they practically double the E-core performance with an overall score of 16,613. This gives us a clear overview of what is contributing to our total score of 25,226, meaning that in terms of multi-core performance, the E-cores contribute roughly 33% of it, which isn't something to pass over. Taking a look at our Blender classroom render, we see that the E-cores are no joke. While alone, they took over 10 minutes going from the P-cores only configuration to the controlled one, shows an increase in nearly 2 minutes. Considering the low amount of time we are already taking, this is really impressive and shows just how much these cores help with the multi-core tasks. Lastly, in our CPU testing, I want to take a look at temperatures to see just how much E-cores can heat up your system. For this, I ran 2 tests using a Deepcool AK620 CPU cooler. This is a twin tower fan cooler and is a great option for cooling budget processors. In our first test, we saw the system peak at 80 degrees Celsius without utilizing any E-cores. When enabling them, we see an increase of our peak temperature of only 3 degrees Celsius. Remember, we are adding 8 overclocked cores to our system and only seeing a package temperature increase of 3 overall. I will say for this part, if you're an overclocker looking to get the most out of your CPU performance, then disabling E-cores can assist you in system temperatures. But if you're the 90% who don't do that, then it doesn't make a difference having them on or off when considering PC heat. Alright, so obviously they aren't a scam if you're looking to use them in workstation tasks, but what about gaming? Well, I ran 4 modern games at 1080p medium settings so that we get a good CPU balance scenario. We also paired our CPU with an RX 6900 XT from AMD, which has more than enough power for our testing. Starting off with our easiest to run game, Forza Horizon 5 showed us that gaming on only E-cores isn't the greatest of ideas. While alone, they would make a great budget processor. Considering that you have 6 P-cores at your disposal, you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. The scores I want to focus on for this part of the testing are the P-core only test versus the control test, and in Forza the results didn't make that much of a difference. We did see a slight increase in average FPS and 1% lows while the E-cores were enabled, but nothing that would set it apart, and that trend continues across the rest of our 3 games tested. We see them basically performing the same despite having extra cores in our system. All these tests were ran with nothing but MSI Afterburning running in the background, so the system processes were 100% towards the game. But what if we have tasks running in the background? For this test, I'll be running a Discord call with YouTube music playing and a random Twitch stream running in the background as well. This is representative of what a typical gaming session would look like, at least for me, and to my surprise, we see no difference in performance whatsoever. This means that honestly, if you're gaming, these 8 extra cores added to a processor aren't really worth it. The last test I want to run is a combination test. Let's say you are a content creator who wants to take a break to game while something is rendering in the background. So you set your Blender render to only hit your E-cores and you open up Cyberpunk 2077 to see how your experience is. And honestly, it's not that bad. We saw our overall average FPS stay exactly the same throughout our benchmark versus our test without anything running in the background. The only downside was our 1% lows. Those dropped down to a mere 62 frames versus 115 frames without Blender running. I suspect this may be due to other resources in our computer being utilized, like our RAM specifically. I did run this test using 2 different SSDs on our system so as to not cause a bottleneck via our drive. Besides stuttering down to 60 frames occasionally, I would say it was still an overall playable experience considering our extreme PC use. So in conclusion, if you're a gamer who may be considering buying Intel because of its extra E-core performance versus AMD, don't. Instead of focusing on the core count in this situation, focus on the overall platform price and pick out the cheaper one. If you're a content creator like me and either want the fastest experience for your money or want to be able to play games and render at the same time, I have to recommend Intel 100% of the time. I believe if AMD doesn't catch up onto the E-core trend like Intel and Apple, they will be leaving money on the table for consumers who use their PCs for workstation tasks. I definitely want to see them compete more with Intel and look forward to future products. And to answer the question I posed at the beginning of this video, no, they aren't a scam, but just make sure you're buying the right processor for your needs. That's it for this video. Check out this one where I do a full review of the i5-13600K. It is a pretty amazing processor.